Hello and welcome to SolarTechDIY.com. This is Patrick, and I'm demonstrating how solar cell pairs are joined in order to create a strip, or string as I've referred to them. Now the first thing we do, as we always do when, in fact you've done many times when making your pairs, we first use our rosin flux pen. We apply that rosin flux to our bus bars, and in this case our bus tabs, and then we're going to slide that pair that I'm currently working on to the right, and you see I've staged the pencil erasers that we use for spacers between our pairs. The anchor pair is already weighted down, and remember I showed you in the past the the 1 yard long yardstick, which you can see just below my business card. And while that business card is a nice plug for our business, I put it there to illustrate the end of the yardstick and the so you could have a point of reference. But the yardstick is a very useful tool for ensuring a straight string, which you'll see when we show you that video on laying the strings into your substrate. If a string is crooked, it can really eat up a disproportionate amount of space, and you could find yourself with a fit problem. But if you employ a tactic like this, you won't find that to be a problem. Now, the nice thing about using our pencil erasers when we made our pairs, and then now when we're creating our string, is that the gap is very, very consistent. All throughout your solar panel, it will be a uniform and aesthetically pleasing appearance. Now I'm not suggesting that the absence of a spacer would lead to the opposite or haphazard appearance, but if details are important, and certainly the degree of straightness lends to the professionalism of your work. So it's always a good idea to get it as straight as you can. And trust me, you will be bragging about this to your friends and neighbors. This is pretty cool. I mean, you gotta admit, when you're in your garage or in your living room working on this, this is the type of a project that really sets you apart from people who are doing maybe nothing, or perhaps less interesting pursuits. And since I'm doing a repetitive task here that you've already seen, and you by this stage you've already done this to the point hopefully of mastering, so I'm just going to talk about photovoltaics in general while you watch, because I've described these steps to you, and of course I'll intersperse with instructions, because I did encounter some pretty unusual things here on this string. And of course, you know, I'm narrating. It just is easier to narrate as opposed to concentrating on what you're saying while you're doing it. It's always a good idea to concentrate on soldering when you're soldering. It's not difficult, but it requires your attention. Now, I do want to talk about what I'm doing right here. You'll notice I didn't immediately employ the solder wire. I just now am bringing the solder wire itself into play. And the reason for that is, and as good as this camera angle is, it deprives you of being able to judge what's going on in terms of horizontal off the work surface. But I was having great difficulty getting the tabbing wire that I'm working on right now to stop springing up. Even after I had applied a little solder with the soldering iron without the solder wire itself, it still kept attempting to spring up, which is kind of unusual. So what you can do, you can front load your solder tip with the solder wire, meaning you depress the trigger, build up a little bit of the solder on the heated tip, which you then apply directly onto the bus tab that's giving you trouble. And not the whole tab necessarily, but here's where your poker instrument comes into play, because you'll hold the pesky tabbing wire down uh, while simultaneously just touching it with the hot, kind of saturated solder tip, because once that solder makes contact with the tabbing wire, it will transfer onto the tabbing wire and then act like kind of like a little dab of glue. And once it's in place and it's not moving, you can bring your solder tip along with the solder wire to bear and really get a good tight fit. And you'll see there's visual appearance variances when you're looking at the solders I'm making right here versus the ones to the right on the cell with that large weight on it. Those scorch marks tell me I had a little bit of difficulty getting the tabbing wire to adhere to those bus tabs. And there will be times when you do have some difficulty. It just might not feel like it wants to stick. Or, one unfortunate happenstance, if you're having an unusual amount of trouble with a particular bus tab, let's say you've applied your rosin flux, just like we're doing here, and you've done that properly, you're not aware of any obvious visual impurities or anything that would outwardly and obviously cause a problem with the bonding of these two surfaces. And the more you work on it, the greater the likelihood that bus tab or bus bar will become compromised. That they're not part of the original cell. I mean, they're not part of the silicone wafer. They're an add-on in the factory, and it's a material that's specially designed to to propagate this bonding, but it's not terribly durable. So, if you touch it, scrape it, you can wipe it right off the cell. And then you got a problem, because now you don't have anything to grip. There's nothing to bond to. Don't panic. All is not lost. There is a product which I have on my website. It's also in the instruction manual. You can apply this product. It's sort of an aftermarket bus tab. It's a liquid conductivity pen, so to speak. I don't have it right in front of me, so I don't want to make up stuff about it. So we'll come back to that. Just remember, if you have a bus tab or a bus bar that just seems to be no longer viable, there is an alternative. You can rescue it. So just go to the website solartechdiy.com, and I have a little article about it, rescuing a bus tab or bus bar. It can be frustrating, absolutely. Now, I also want to point out that this video is high def and it picks up a lot of details. And one thing I experienced while I was doing this particular filming, my hands were shaking very badly. I was having a difficult time achieving success on some of these solders, and I actually fractured a cell. If you see the cell that's directly under my business card that has two of the black sockets as weights, as placeholders, if you look below and to the left of the lower weight, I fractured that. So, word to the wise, if I weren't filming a how-to video, I would extract that cell, I'm going to attempt to repair it with clear silicone caulking. Not ideal. You know, if we're talking about putting these up on our roofs or on our RVs or on the farm or providing power to an electric fence out on the range, a pump, a well pump. You know, we're going to put some heavy duty responsibility, and we need a solar panel that's going to be reliable. So just to sleep well at night and have a good conscience, I wouldn't put into service something that's as catastrophically damaged as that cell. Having said that, you did observe on one of these tapes when we were adding the 9th cell to a string, I believe is the title of that film, I did encounter a fairly severely fractured cell. If I remember correctly, it was fractured from the topmost bus tab all the way parallel with the right edge, and it continued through the lower bus tab. And I didn't feel very good about that particular cell, but I proceeded for the sake of making the video. I tested it, which I also put up on the SolarTech DIY YouTube channel, so you can check that out. I used my custom testing platform, and the cell tested out just fine. So I applied some clear silicone caulking. In fact, you're going to come across that particular cell because it's in this batch. Now, for the sake of filming, repetition is good. I was just filming to show how this is done. If any of you have been keeping count of how long this string is, you may have noticed we're going to exceed 9 cells and just keep going. So I know that if you caught it, you're awesome. You're on it. But because this was just a demonstration of joining the pairs, it's okay. I ended up removing the excess portion, the little mini string, and in fact you can watch that particular mini string being inserted into a substrate, and it becomes part of a functioning solar module. So this all worked beautifully. Very nice solar panel. And getting back to our discussion about this as a trade, in my instruction manual I talk about this. This isn't a hobby, this is really a trade. And I say a trade because there are people who see this as a hobby, but there's also other individuals who I've talked to that kind of in the survival slash prepper community who see this as a barter trade, where in the event of some sort of societal collapse or even a prolonged interruption of grid power, such as if there were an EMP type blast, electromagnetic pulse, which would destroy the grid, or a solar X flare, suddenly the ability to create electricity when none other is available, you would suddenly be a very, very popular and very wealthy tradesman. No question about that. But of course, nobody wants to see that happen. If you're out on the farm, I could just go on for 2 days straight about the number of applications for these solar modules. And you probably agree, or else you wouldn't be watching this. So the goal is here to teach you that this is absolutely achievable. You don't have to have years of experience in electronics or even having ever done this before. I'm not saying be foolhardy and rush into it and recklessly build enough solar panels to coat your roof. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you can do this. You can learn and start from scratch with your solar cells and one of my kits, and you can become very proficient and build a very reliable, safe, functioning solar panel that will give you years of service. But it requires your attention to detail and diligence. Uh, and having said that, in the instruction manual, I talk about taking your time, uh, being in a frame of mind where you're not rushed. And that accounts for why my hands are shaking during the shooting of the video, because normally I would not just sit down and knock out a string just to beat a time, which I had one eye on the clock because I didn't want to make a hour-long recording of the same thing over and over, but I felt rushed, and artificially so my hands shook, and you're seeing it. But this is how you join your pairs into a string. I just wanted to show you the process. You just join 2, 4, 6, 8, and then we custom made our 7, 8, 9th mini string. And in the next video, I'll show you what to do with this string. We lay it into the panel. Good job. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you then.